Hi everybody! In this video, we will analyze Ukraine from 4 points of view: the social, technological, political, and economic one. But first, let's start with a brief introduction of history and geography.
Ukraine became an independent country on August 24, 1991, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The country has a current territory of 603,548 square kilometers. Their currency is the hryvnia, and the most important cities are Kiev, Kharkov, and Odessa. The country has a population of 41,418,717 people. In the social field, Ukrainians are 75% of the population, along with the Russian, who comprise 22% of the total population, and other 3%. The population pyramid of Ukraine corresponds to 67.81% of people between 0 to 14 years old, 15.44% of people between 15 to 64 years old, and 16.76% of people over 64 years old. The official language is Ukrainian, spoken by 67.5% of the population. Russian is spoken by about 30% of the population. Also, the predominant religion is Christianity in a percentage of 82.5%. In the technological field, Ukraine is among the world's leading producers and exporters of corn, wheat, and barley. Ukraine's largest good exports are in products of low and moderate complexity, like agriculture and metals. Also, the economic growth is driven by diversification into new products that are incrementally more complex. Ukraine has added 40 new products since 2004, and these products contributed $94 in income per capita in 2019. Ukraine has diversified into new products to contribute the income growth, and politically, the type of government in Ukraine is a parliamentary democracy, in which its organization is divided into three powers: executive, legislative, and judicial. Currently, the president is Volodymyr Zelensky, elected in 2019 by an absolute majority.
Now, we're going to talk about the economic composition of Ukraine. Ukraine production is mainly based on agriculture and livestock. As we mentioned before, its production complexity is pretty low. If we look at the chart, we can see that 9.14% of its exportation are transport. That's why in 2019, Ukraine was the 46th largest producer of vehicles in the world and 13th largest producer of steel. But in 2020, its production fell by 22.5%. Also, we can see other kind of products, such as corn, that corresponds to 7.22%, wheat, and sunflower seed oil. The most important export destinations are China, with a 7.1% of the total, then Russia, and Poland. On the other hand, the top three countries that Ukraine imported from are China, Russia, and Germany. Having this in mind, we move ahead to the macroeconomic data. First, we have the annual growth percentage of the exports. As we can see, its exportation have been decreasing rather than growing, especially in 2014, that decreased in 17.42%. The opposite is for 2017, that increased by 3.92%, and 2019, that achieved its peak, having a growth of 7.39%. In that year, Ukraine exported $68.4 billion in products. Exports have declined by an annual average of 0.8% over the past 5 years, as exports represent a shrinking segment of the economy. Non-oil exports have declined by 0.6% annually over the past 5 years, falling down the global average growth. The tendencies are similar for imports, that made a total of $71.7 billion in 2019, leaving Ukraine with a trade deficit in goods and services. The last year, 2021, the annual growth was negative by 9.5%. Now, we're going to analyze the gross domestic product in dollars over the last 10 years. The highest point was in 2013, with a GDP of $190.5 billion. The lowest point was in 2015, with 91. The last data in 2020 with 155.5 billion. Continue with the next indicator, we have the annual growth percentile of the GDP. As we see in the graphic, there was a decreasing tendency until 2014. In this year, the GDP contracted the most, by 10.8%. We can relate the situation with the social instability and the Crimean crisis that shocked its economy. Then, Ukraine economy have been recovering slowly in 2015 and then reached a peak of 2.44% in 2016. Those years, the annual growth had been fluctuating until 2019. Then GDP plumped again in 2020, having a decreasing of 4%. In the following slides, we're going to study how the GDP is composed. We can see that exports have been decreasing as a percentage of the GDP since 2015. This way, in 2020, represented at 39.06% of the gross domestic product. The same is for imports, that in 2020 represented only a 40.1% of the GDP. Finally, we have the inflation rate that had an increasing tendency until 2015, achieving its highest point, where consumer prices increasing in 48.7%. Then, this indicator fell abruptly the next years and continued decreasing until now. Okay, that's all for our presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.